Hello, everybody, and welcome to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, and I'm very honoured and privileged to be joined by Jeffrey Pierce, joining us cross continent from America for an interview about The Last of Us. Of course, played the role of Perry in the HBO live series, with both episodes now aired, and Tommy from both games, which is amazing. That's a story within itself. We know there's been a few of the actors that have done that, which is always amazing to see that jump to live action. But first of all, how are you doing today?
Doing very well. Enjoying sort of like the glow of HBO's success. It's crazy.
I mean, I love saying this. Over here in the UK, HBO, it's not new to us, but it's not as well known as America. So when the HBO logo comes on and you get the amazing noise, it's just the perfect way. You know you're in for an absolute amazing time of a TV show. And The Last of Us has absolutely delivered with that, especially off the first 5 episodes, what we were allowed to talk about. I know that I've seen the series. I know you're watching as an audience member, which is equally as amazing. It's
Hmm.
something I regret watching it early, but I don't. Um, but what I'd love to ask you first is, can you talk us through that process from not just going from the game series to live action? Can you talk about the journey from the show being in development to first being asked to maybe audition if there were other roles? I'd love to know how it came to be that we got you in the series as well.
Well, I mean, it really all began about 12 or 13 years ago when I first met Neil. It was just one of those auditions that pops up and they say, "Hey, will you take a look at a video game?" And I don't have any snobbery if the writing is good, and the writing was great. And so I went in and we met, and I read for Joel, and gave a very, very, very good audition. and then and Troy Baker came in about 20 minutes later and gave a very, 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 very good audition and really just embodied Joel in ways that were you couldn't beat it. It was just he opens his mouth and he is that character. So 6 months later, I was playing Tommy, and that sort of began the journey. For this
And
one, just in terms of like the timing of when this came back into my life, Neil and I have stayed close over the years. And when it got picked up, I shot him a note and said, "Hey, if there's anything for me to do, I will be there with bells on." Um, and he called, and it happened. So it's a great journey.
absolutely. And I think one thing for me, playing that for the first time in 2013 when it was on the PS3, picking up at launch, it was one of those games for me at the time. I was just almost 17, not just getting into games more. I've played Call of Duty most of my life, like everyone, but as someone with the background in film, that was the first time I was like, whoa, like, am I like playing a 10-hour film? Like, it was so good.
Mm.
And that's why when, the rumors that followed the rights were picked up, oh, The Last of Us is going to be a film, I always wondered, can The Last of Us be a film? And as a fan, it's what you want to see. You want to see it in live action. You want to see these characters on the screen. Um, and then the day that HBO then picks up, I think to me that's where everything 180. Like, it's HBO, it's The Last of Us. We've got Neil Druckmann, we've got Craig Mazin, of course we've got Gustavo coming back on the music.
Yeah.
Were you already talking to them before anything was official like that, or was it something where you saw the announcement and sent like a cheeky text to see? Like, I'd love to know how it was for everyone seeing it slowly coming to fruition.
Well, I had just seen Chernobyl, uh, and I binged it and was blown away by it. And within a 2 week span of time, the first headlines came out that Craig and Neil were partnering to do the thing. And I knew that there was, the thing had gestated in different ways because it really is a piece of story that everybody at a different point in time wanted to make. There were a couple different places where it was potentially going to be a film. Screen Gems was one, and then there was another place, and then it was maybe going to be an animated series at a certain point. And all those things fell apart because ultimately they were not going to be sustainable. But as soon
Yeah,
as a storyteller like Craig, who has proven himself on Chernobyl of telling this kind of story and winning 10 Emmys for it, as soon as that partnership is real, you know it's going to be something special. So
yeah,
I didn't have too much inside dope until everybody else did. I knew that there were conversations taking place, but the green light was a great moment.
And I think it's great to hear as well. Certainly, coming off I saw Chernobyl for the first time just before Christmas last year. That there's so many great shows at the moment, and some that just sit on your watch list. And for some reason, I've never seen it. Even with the announcement, I was like, I will watch Chernobyl before The Last of Us comes out, and I binged it in one night. And
Yeah.
I know a bit about the history. My parents were around, of course, when that happened in the 80s. So speaking to them afterwards, do you remember it? Because
Oh,
it was a big deal, especially in Europe, and it's amazing learning more. And I think something that I think translated for me immediately off that first and second episode is Craig Mazin, his approach to it. It's not just telling the story of this is this overarching, this accident. Here are the individuals it's going to affect, and I'm going to tell the story of people affected by Chernobyl. And certainly for me, The Last of Us, that translate perfectly from the game into the series. But having that writing style come on, and certainly with your role of Perry as well, I absolutely loved it when he first appeared. I think it's one of the not the more niche references. I think because there was a lot of focus on Ashley popped up in the trailer, so a lot of
yeah,
people were sort of theorizing everywhere. It sort of went under the radar when I was watching it, and I was like, "Is that Jeffrey Pierce?" And I was like, "Is he got a role in this?" And I love the fact that I think it's a bit more hidden, but you've
yeah,
got a 2 episode arc. You spend a lot of time with Melanie as well, who is amazing as Kathleen.
yeah,
And she's been
yeah,
an absolute hero on social media the last week.
yeah.
Everyone's worth seeing her tweets. But what I kind of would love to ask you with Perry, playing not necessarily a henchman as such, but when you see a lot of these types of shows, these characters, there's this respect between the two that I felt like I've not seen before. And I'd love to know that did Craig and Neil develop a backstory for Perry? Because I know they spoke about Tess on the HBO podcast, and they said we had this entire backstory of what happened to her, and we just couldn't get it on screen. Did Perry have a backstory? I know he hinted at his home being 100 miles away and whatnot in the series, or did you develop one yourself to push that character when you were performing?
Well, their brief to me was pretty simple. They wanted him to be military, ex-military, and a professional. And so I spent about the 6 months that I had in between being cast and shooting, trying to imagine that out and fill that out for myself. And so they were very open to all of the ideas that I threw at him about what his past might have been, and all of that baggage played for me, and gave me opportunities to do things that if we hadn't done that work, if I hadn't sort of like crafted that backstory, the sort of relationship would have been very difficult to pull off. Yeah, I had a lot of freedom to make that mine.
Amazing, and I think as well, working with Kathleen as well, it's one of these amazing characters that, and this is what they've been able to do is, yes, we're adapting this incredible game into a series. Let's just create some more original characters that are going to stick with you. And there's something about Kathleen where, of course, she's the villain per se of the 2 episodes. Us as the audience,
Mm.
but when you really drill it down, her brother was horrifically murdered by a character who we absolutely, well, not by the character of course, but due to the issues of someone to protect his own brother. And it's this really not just tragic ending, but all the siblings in theory end up dying at this point. The city is almost wiped out at that amazing finale, which we'll speak about in a little bit later. But did you get to like develop a relationship with Melanie off screen? Like, were you sort of not in character as such, but I'm playing the professional type. You're this. I don't want to say wounded person, but as your character so describes it, she's the reason that they've been overthrown, not her brother. How was that approach to filming it?
Well, it's talking about. There's not you like sort of have agreements, but I think that they're better when they're unspoken to some degree.
Yeah.
We spent most of our time chatting and talking about the world and talking about our kids and life in general, and it was lovely, sort of just like developing a friendship with such a brilliant and wonderful person. But in terms of sort of like the intellectual grasp, we just sort of both fell into the role. She said something really great in an interview about one of the joys of acting is that when they call action, you get to fall into this other person's body and until they say cut, and that's just kind of how we played. Um, it's a dance, and you just sort of come to the table as a professional and with all your homework done, and then you get to sort of play on the day when they say, let's go. But yeah, I think it can be dangerous to intellectualize it too much because then you lose the heart and soul in the performance, if that makes
Definitely.
sense.
No, no, of course it is. And kind of following that through with Perry as well, his military background. I know you've worked on the Call of Duty Medal of Honor games as well. You've had
Mm.
military roles in the past. Did they sort of come to you directly with the role of Perry, or were there potentially any of the characters that spoke to you about auditioning for or trying to get you in for?
They sent one initially, and I auditioned for it, and they gave, Neil came back and was like, "That's great, try this," and they came back again and said, "That's really great, but try this too." And ultimately, it was not a fit, and for the best reasons possible. He's like, "Look, we're not going to believe that you're sort of like a victim or a weasel, so we're going to see if there's something else down the road." And then scripts for, at the time, I think it was episodes 5 and 6, came in, and he called up and said, "We want to offer you this part. We think that this is perfect for you." And they were right. I mean, it really is my wheelhouse, and it's something that I've had a lot of experience in, from TV and Medal of Honor Warfighter, and then the Call of Duty games and all that sort of world, working with professionals from that community and learning from them. It's just something that's in my hip pocket. And I was able to apply all of it to this, which was a blast.
That's great. And I'd say this is my favorite arc of the series. So episode 3 and 5 to me are my two favorite episodes. I don't mind
Mm,
saying that.
yeah.
Just seeing Kansas City across two episodes, spending time with the characters, seeing bits jump from the game. The bit that caught me on the first viewing, I didn't forget about the sniper in the house, but the moment you hear the sniper, I'm like, oh my god, we're here. We're at this part of the game.
Yeah.
I just love to know, what was that like on set, because I've seen some behind the scenes in the last couple of days where it wasn't, a real estate, it was built by the set designers. There were
Yeah.
almost issues with snow that was falling and they had to get it cleared for filming. Can you talk about that experience of just shooting these scenes? Because I've seen on the YouTube channel for HBO, they've got the Planet of the Apes choreographer
Hmm.
training the infected, which those films are unbelievable. The Circus trilogy. What
Yeah.
was filming like for those shoots, especially with the infected and with all of the you've got the leads around you, you've got the extras as well. What was it filming circumstances wise?
It was unbelievable. It was because nothing was left to the imagination. I showed up. I think my first day, and I said, "So where's the set?" And I got out of hair and makeup, and I was like, "I'm going to go just take a coffee up and wander through there while the sun's up." I walked onto that lot that they built, I think, 16 houses on, and they had probably 20 wrecked cars parked everywhere, and it takes up, I want to say, an eighth of a mile, and it was unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. I've never heard of anything like it outside of the stuff they do for Game of Thrones. Um, and it was perfect in every detail. Yeah, I just walked through it and couldn't believe it. And then we got to play there for 3 nights running. And yeah, the crew fought snow, because even if the snow wasn't really visible when it was coming down, uh, you could see it in the lights. So we had to cancel handfuls of nights. I would have spend the whole day getting ready to go to set, and they'd call like an hour beforehand and be like, "Nah, not happening. Stand down. We'll see you tomorrow." And the crew is, meanwhile, is going in and blowing snow off the roofs and melting the snow and getting it, just like an unbelievable amount of work behind the scenes to make all that stuff run right. And just hats off to them, because there's no way we could have done it without them.
Definitely. Within that scene, of course, we have not just almost the stampede. We've got clickers. We get the introduction of the bloater. I know it was one of the big trailer moments from the series. I know that everyone that's got a history with that game knows. Of course,
Has
you've got the clickers.
nightmares about the bloaters.
Yeah, I mean, how is it for yourself? Maybe when you read that script for the first time, that you're obviously not the only victim of the bloater, but you get like the moment, the death on screen, and we sort of touched upon Game of Thrones earlier. Game of Thrones was this almost calling card that if they were cast, and they would almost their death almost cemented their legacy within the series.
Yeah.
Can you talk us through finding out about how Perry would go. Because I loved the sequence. It wasn't anyone made of fear. It was sort of ready to accept it, and then he just has the most horrific ending of I think anyone we've seen so far on the show. What was that like filming? Because I think there was a bit of practical. There was someone in costume. There was also
Oh yeah.
CGI to go over the top. What was that experience like?
It was. I mean, look, when we're doing the games, the joy of that is that it's all imagination. So you're playing at whatever scope all the actors on the stage and the director can agree to, and it's fun. It's like being a kid playing Army, but with real intent. To be on a set in the perfect wardrobe with the perfect weapons for exactly how you would want it to play out, with everything set up right, with 75 stuntmen and women pouring out of this hole in the ground, and then 6'6" Adam coming out as the bloater and charging across the street at you. It's just like heaven. I mean, it just you can just be there in the moment and play, and that was what it was all about. Um, and Adam is hilarious because in between takes, he'd be up there doing the Thriller dance in his 80-pound bloater costume. Um, and then on the day, we just sort of like go for it every time. It was great.
That's amazing, and I think that's something that's so exciting that, and it's credit to the show when they've introduced, whether it's infected for the first time, it's been the clickers, the bloater. There's almost this shred of respect, but before they introduce them, and I know that Neil spoke about it in the podcast how important and integral bringing these things are into that live action, and I think with the instruction of yourself and Kathleen, that just gives the story arc so much more levity. And ultimately, we all know. Well, if you didn't play the game, you obviously wouldn't have known about Sam and Henry, but we knew as viewers. And I think it makes it fascinating that even when Kathleen goes, that fate is horrendous as well.
Mm,
And we know she spoke. It's not the circle of life of such, but it says children die, and for her fate to be killed by a 7-year-old clicker who is quite terrifying. I saw that it's a young girl that's a contortionist, I believe,
yeah, yeah.
which I can't picture that. I think that would be more terrifying on set than maybe anything else. Which is again a credit to the incredible makeup department because there's a lot of shows that might have just CG'd everything, and we know that CGI can be an amazing tool.
Yeah,
But when we get practical effects, and especially for yourself as an actor, it must make it so much easier to approach those scenes.
it does. And with especially when you're blending the two things together, the opportunity for the people at Weta to use what's really been done on camera and apply CG on top of that, as opposed to making it out of nothing, is just about. I mean, because it becomes so seamless. When you see CGI and you're like, "That's CGI," then they feel like they failed their job. And the guys and girls at Weta who did the CG for episode 5 and the rest of the show are the best in the business, and they absolutely, you can't tell when it shifts from one to the other.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a viewer as well, it makes it so much better for the eye for the viewing experience. And kind of in line that, I love to put you on the spot with maybe not a trick question as such, but what do you think it is that's made The Last of Us this phenomenon? Whether it's the games, whether it's the series, that culturally its significance is incredible. Given that it's 10 years old, it's 10 years old this
Mm.
year as an IP, and yet I don't even know if we're at its peak because it just astounds. It gets better and better. Is there anything in particular you think that's always made it clean cut above the rest?
I think that when we go to the theater, most of the time, like to a play, we'll start there. We leave there feeling empty. Maybe you got entertained, but you don't leave that theater moved emotionally or changed by the experience. I think most of the time when we watch television and film, we're hoping for something. And most of the time, it's just the thrill of entertainment. So when something comes across that is entertainment, but it takes your heart and squeezes it in such a way that you weep in front of your game console, uh, it's addictive. We want that experience as human beings. It's part of the fabric of what we do. We love story. We need story. Story is how we learn about ourselves and how we become better citizens, better human beings, better people, because that emotion, it changes us. And we have understood that from the days of, the Greek theater. That's where you go to learn about yourself. The Last of Us, from the first story beat, from Sarah's death, is that type of experience. And every step along the way, staying close to that sort of journey into the human emotional psyche uh, is what it's about. And I think that's why people are moved by it, and I think that's why we come back to it, and I think that's why the game is so resonant 10 years down the road.
That's an amazing response to that question. Thank you for that. And I think you're absolutely bang on with that. And you mentioned returning to the game. Of course, it's been not just released on PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, but there's going to be the multiplayer this year. It is amazing that it's almost multiple generational. That I know people a lot younger than me that played it when they were kids and whatnot. And I think it's amazing. This kind of story resonates with everyone, sort of everywhere, and it's just incredible to see where the series is going to go, where we know it does go. So thank you so much for that. And what I'd love to sort of end this interview on is, did you get the chance to speak to Gabriel Luna at all? Because I know we saw him in the first episodes. I'd love to know, did you ever get to meet him before he was in the role or maybe after?
We didn't meet until the red carpet premiere in Los Angeles in January. And it was one of those moments where you like meet someone for the first time and you feel like you've known them forever. He is such a consummate professional and a brilliant actor, and his approach was world class. He said, he mentioned that he treated it like a biopic, like Tommy was a person that he was going to study and learn to play and then bring himself to. And he did that in every single way you can imagine. Um, so yeah, I've got another brother, which is
Definitely.
great.
No, that's amazing. And it'll be exciting for everyone to get the chance to see him again when he does pop up in the series. And I think
This
that's what's
weekend
exciting.
coming up soon.
Exactly. And I didn't know if I was allowed to say that. So, yes, we can.
Well,
I can
he's in the
say that.
previews. He's in the previews, so it's common knowledge.
Excellent. So that is going to round out this review. Again, Jeffrey, thank you so much for taking the time to join us across the continent. I know it's early in the morning for yourself.
No
It's been an
worries.
absolute pleasure. We've got a link to everywhere in the social media. Everybody, please follow Jeffrey as well. It's just one of those amazing experiences that The Last of Us, it's a weekly thing. We get to talk about it every week. I never thought I'd be in this position to speak to someone that has an amazing connection to it, its history with the game, making that jump to live action in a HBO, of all the companies to have done a HBO series. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. And to everybody at home, also thank you so much for watching today.
All
Take
right,
care.
it's my pleasure. Cheers. Take care.